Hey everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com and it's Friday. Got to get down on Friday, and you know what that means. It's my favourite time of the week, and you know why that is, because it's time for my Wrestlers of the Week. It's been a bit of a quiet week. There's been no big major shows. There's been a few little excellent matches here and there across the wrestling world, but it hasn't been as big as previous weeks in terms of the G1 and everything. Does that make it less exciting, I hear you say? No, I think, in my opinion, to be honest, it makes it more exciting because little people that we've not seen too much of, or maybe not at all this year on Wrestlers of the Week, can sneak through the cracks, snatch a few points, and then scuttle back into the darkness. Don't know where I was going with that, but yeah. No, it's been an ordinary week in the world of wrestling, but I think that makes for an exciting one on this series. On now to the honourable mentions, and of course, when I woke up this morning, my mentions on Twitter were absolutely rammed full of notifications. I was like, what's going on here? Why have I got so many mentions? It is, of course, because the Dallas Renegades are going to win the XFL and are going to take over the world, and I'm staking my fandom for them right here, right now. My honourable mention this week goes to the Dallas Renegades. And also Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch got engaged as well, and I hope they're very happy. That's why my mentions were full. That's what it was. It wasn't to do with the Dallas Renegades at all. Moving very swiftly on to my number 10. Number 10 this week goes to a man who I think has a potentially huge future in WWE, and his name is Angel Gaza. Gaza was an important feature this week on 205 Live. He's also cropped up in NXT before, but on 205 Live this week he was part of that big Survivor Series style multi-man elimination match, and he was obviously on the heel team, and it didn't go too well for him. Well, no, it went better for him than every other member of his team. He didn't win the match. He was the last surviving member of his team before elimination. But I thought this match was another excellent showcase of just what he can do and just why his future in WWE seems so bright, as I said. I even had a little joke on Twitter. I went, yo, what do you call it when Angel Gaza whips off his long tights and reveals the short ones underneath? Is it a Gaza strip? When Pachi does a pun on Twitter, everyone's like, Adam, what are you like? When I do a pun on Twitter, I have people saying that they were going to unfollow me. I have people saying, how dare you? I don't know what's going on. I don't know what everyone's problem is. Angel Gaza had a really good week. And I checked as well, by the way, to make sure that it's Angel Gaza, not Angel Gaza. And it is the anglicised pronunciation of the name, at least in the WWE verse. So, Angel Gaza, 1 point for you. Welcome to Wrestlers of the Week. And off camera, Sam said that he reminded him a bit of Eddie Guerrero. And you know what? I think I'm going to have to agree. Obviously, he's not at that level quite yet, but his mannerisms, his heelishness, his general suaveness / smarminess, and his just charisma and talent in the ring all combines together, and I think we could be seeing big things in the future from Angel Gaza. Next up, another man in that match, and a man who could be a big rival of Gaza's heading forward. A handsome man, as they remind us every time he crops up on 205 Live. It's none other than Umberto Carrillo. If there's one drawback from Carrillo at the minute, it's that he is a bit of a clean-cut, squeaky clean babyface, and there's not too much of an edge to his character. Yes, he was tempted by the heelish stable of 205 Live a little while ago, but he's back to being just a pure thoroughbred babyface right now. And to be honest with you, I've said that's a bit of a weakness to his character. I actually think that could be a strength, because there's always room in wrestling for just 100% flat-out babyfaces in the mould of Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and I think that Carrillo certainly fills that gap. Carrillo was one of the two surviving members of the babyface team alongside Oney Lorcan, who I should have probably given an honourable mention to actually, but it was Carrillo who picked up the climactic pinfall for his team, leaping off the top rope. Can't remember what his move's called, but it's a weird kind of diving reverse splash thing onto Angel Gaza, picking up the 3 count and securing himself 2 points in the bag for Wrestlers of the Week. Is it just me, or does it seem like they're potentially grooming Carrillo to become the next Cruiserweight champion? I'm not quite sure. We obviously have a heel champion at the moment in Drew Gulak. His next big challenger seems to be Oney Lorcan, but if Lorcan fails, I can see Carrillo swooping in there and picking up a shock, Rocky-esque upset victory over Drew Gulak. But that's just a bit of fantasy booking on my part. What do you think of Umberto Carrillo? Do you think he is as big a star as everyone seems to think he is? My mind is telling me right now that Angel Gaza has a bit more of an upside, but then again, Carrillo is only about 23 years old, and he still has a long way to go in the development of his career. Regardless, a very good week for Carrillo, and I hope to see it continue. Next up, let's go over to Stardom, where their big annual round-robin tournament, their equivalent, I guess, of New Japan's G1 Climax, started this week, and the best match was on day one, featuring this woman, Cadet Soo. I think Cadet Soo's cropped up a little bit on Wrestlers of the Week before. Not too certain about this year, but I think she did at least in 2018, and basically she is the most consistent heel at the top of the card in Stardom. She's the leader of the Odeyo Tai heel stable. They do a little dance before their matches sometimes, but it's all devious and heelish, and I just think she's really good. One of the most charismatic women on the entire roster, and I also think she's one of the stronger ones in ring too. She's not quite on the level, in my opinion, from what I've seen anyway, of someone like Momo Watanabe, but she is still very, very good and is very well rounded in her in-ring and mic skills. Cadet Soo actually lost the opening match of the tournament, but I think it was probably the best match of night one, and I think also she really did help put over another one of her competitors in defeat, because she is such a big deal, and she was until quite recently the top champion in Stardom. The fact that she's now lost on night one is a really good example of using booking in a tournament to help get a newer, fresher face over in defeating them. I'm sure that as the tournament goes on, don't worry if you're like a big fan of Cadet Soo or anything, and if you are, you probably know more about Stardom than me, so please do let me know on Twitter or in the comments more about Stardom, because I'm trying to learn. I'm quite new to the promotion. But if you are a fan of hers, I wouldn't worry too much. I think she'll still pick up some big wins going forward against some big opponents, so there's not too much to fear. I think she'll be okay. Do I think she'll win the tournament? No, absolutely not. But do I think she'll have some impressive showings from here on out? Yes, I do, 100%. Next up, number 7 this week is none other than my boy, our collective boy, one of the best wrestlers of our generation, Daniel Bryan. Like Cadet Soo actually, D. Bryan had a great week, not in terms of his own personal success, but in terms of helping put somebody else over in a shocking defeat on SmackDown Live. He would have made it higher on this week's, points allocations if it wasn't for that storyline. There's been mixed reviews about this storyline. I'm not personally a fan of it. I think it's a little bit too wacky, and it's taken a bit of a surreal turn for no reason. It's a little bit WCW-esque. Bad days of WCW, but at the same time, if anyone can pull that off, if anyone can blend silliness and seriousness well, it's Daniel Bryan. Basically, if you're unaware what happened, right, so after this excellent match on SmackDown that Bryan had, where he did shockingly lose and then got his heat back afterwards, which I wasn't too certain about either, but after all that had happened, Bryan and Rowan unveiled to Roman Reigns the man who had attacked him over the past few weeks, and it was a man who looked a bit like Eric Rowan. What's going on? If you watch this segment, just watch Daniel Bryan try not to laugh. And he doesn't corpse. He doesn't, if you're not watching for it, you can't really tell, but he does kind of go like, and kind of have to turn away from the camera a little bit. He's shaking with intensity because they've just revealed to Roman this bloke who's run him down or tried to run him down. And it's just not someone we've ever seen before. One or two people on Twitter were suggesting to me that it's Luke Harper and he's just shaved his head and dyed his beard red. It's not Luke Harper, is it? I've really looked closely at his face. It's not Luke Harper at all. I just don't know what to make of this. I just think it's too silly. I'll give SmackDown the benefit of the doubt. We'll see what happens next week. But what's going on? Regardless of that, Daniel Bryan did really well in-ring this week, and if it wasn't for the silliness, in my opinion, of that storyline, he'd be scooping a few extra points as well, but he's still ranked 7th this week. Good stuff for D. Bryan. Next up, number 6, Pentagon Jr., Pentagon, Penta L0M, Penta L0 Miata, Pentagon, the bigger one of the Lucha Brothers. Pentagon had the biggest match of the indie wrestling world this week, taking on Jon Moxley at Northeast Wrestling. They had sort of a 20-minute main event, and again, actually, I realized that I've stacked this list this week in terms of losers versus winners, because Pentagon also lost that match to Moxley, and didn't just lose it, he lost it in intense, and in my opinion, feud-building fashion. The reason for this is that after a pretty good match, Pentagon was then unmasked by Jon Moxley. Not after the match, in fact. It was in the finish. He was unmasked, Moxley pinned him, and Pentagon is being kind of humiliated in a way by one of the hottest stars of the non-WWE scene right now. My question is this little feud going to carry over into AEW? We've seen Kenny Omega and Pentagon have a bit of a feud without really being a locked-in, intense feud, because of course we've had Kenny Omega versus Pentagon at All In. That moved into those matches, the feud between the Bucks and the Lucha Brothers in AEW once it started proper. And Omega and Pentagon always have these little interactions in multi-man matches where they just start lighting each other up, big style. But at the same time, it's never been like a proper, official, intense feud like they're trying to build Omega versus Moxley as. I'm wondering that after Omega and Moxley's all said and done, are we going to see Moxley and Pentagon do something? I don't know if this is going to be confined to the indie scene or whether it's going to bleed over into AEW. My gut says no, just because Pentagon's obviously a key member of the tag team division in AEW. But then again, you never know what's going to happen. And I think maybe, especially once they've got weeks of television to fill, we could see Moxley and Pentagon clash a little bit more. Next up, another big loser this week. It's the week of bloody losers. I would never call this man a loser to his face. He would end me in a heartbeat, in milliseconds. It's Matt Riddle. Yes, Riddle also lost this week on NXT actually against Killian Dane in a really brutal, hard-hitting brawl. One which was contested between two really dominant figures, I guess, in the world of wrestling. Yes, we haven't seen Dane look too dominant, I suppose, in his WWE run so far, but he was beforehand, and Matt Riddle at the same time is always a really dominant figure in wrestling too. So after a really good match, a really entertaining and fast-paced and hard-hitting match on NXT TV, I hit myself really hard, we saw Matt Riddle, in my opinion, quite shockingly fall to defeat against Killian Dane, especially after that brawl at TakeOver where Dane looked to have the better of Riddle. I thought that would lead to Riddle beating him on NXT. Instead, Dane's continued to press the advantage and has handed Matt Riddle a rare loss, which I did find pretty surprising. But then it just goes to show, I suppose, that Riddle can take the occasional loss, and I don't think it'll harm his stature at all. He's so popular, so charismatic, and so electrifying to watch in the ring that I don't think this is going to harm him too much in the long run at all. In fact, it adds fuel to their feud, and I can't wait to see where it goes next. So well done, Matt Riddle. Some points for you, some consolation points, even though you lost on NXT, but I'm sure that's going to make that defeat just a little bit easier to take. A lot easier, in fact, because as we know, my Wrestlers of the Week points are the hottest commodity in professional wrestling. Next up, number 4, someone admittedly that I'm not too familiar with, another Stardom wrestler, the woman who beat Cadet Soo this week in day 1 of the 5-star Grand Prix tournament in Stardom. It's Konami. After watching this match, I'm instantly a pretty big fan of Konami. Her style is really easy on the eye. I really enjoy watching her wrestle. She's really good at blending strikes and submissions and that sort of thing. Did a bit of research on her, and it actually makes a lot of sense because you guess who she was trained by? It was Asuka, so you can guess what sort of quality she brings to the ring. The match was pretty back and forth, but eventually Konami was just too strong for Cadet Soo. She beat her up, up, down, down, left, right, all over the arena. See what I've done there? It's the bloody Konami code. Yeah? Gaming references on Wrestlers of the Week. What's going to happen next? I had to check with the lads at Triple Jump that I'd got the Konami code correct. I know that's not the complete one either, and I googled it to make sure, but couldn't memorize it all, but I've tried my best there and I hope you appreciate it. So yes, Konami picks up the huge victory on night 1 of the tournament, and it looks pretty good for her heading forwards. Do I think she'll win the tournament? No, I don't think she'll win either. I think there's other women in the tournament who potentially stand more of a chance. Like, for example, Hayashi Shita, who is young and has just picked up wrestling so quickly. She made a few Wrestlers of the Week appearances last year. I think this could be her year to win the whole tournament. But you never know. I think, though, that Konami has found a new fan in me. Also, you might have noticed, right, it's time to break the fourth wall. Owen's been editing Wrestlers of the Week these past few weeks, and he loves when I choose little funny pictures to put in. So I've just been scouring the Instagrams and the Twitters of these wrestlers to find funny pictures we can use. This one of Konami, right, she doesn't really do that many funny pictures. She does more like cute ones. So that explains why that one's just a bit, you can't even see her bloody face in it, man. I do have to give a shout out to her caption though, which was, "Thank you Osaka for the event and pajama party. It was embarrassing." I think something's got a bit lost in translation there. It was embarrassing. In English would mean that was a disgrace of an event. I think she just means, oh, it was so embarrassing to be in my pajamas at an event, but you know. Let's move on to number 3. Number 3, a man I've already mentioned on this week's list already. It's Jon Moxley, who did embarrass and humiliate and disrespect Pentagon at Northeast Wrestling's event. In the main event, in a 20-minute match, a big indie victory for our favourite big indie boy, Jonathan Moxley. However, it wasn't quite as full throttle as you might imagine from a match between Moxley and Pentagon, and that may have something to do, although I'm not quite sure when he picked it up, but that may have something to do with these reports that Moxley is protecting an elbow injury in the build-up to his huge match with Kenny Omega at All Out on the 31st. God, that's getting quite close, isn't it? So in these recent matches, Moxley has kind of been taking it a little bit easy, holding back a little bit, especially in that match he had, I'm not sure which promotion it was for, but his tag match with Darby Allin in that open-air baseball sort of stadium where it was raining. There was a few gifs of that floating around on Twitter. That looked like a fun match too. Unfortunately, I didn't catch the whole thing, so I couldn't take that into account for this week. But he did look in that one to be moving a little bit gingerly to protect that arm, and I fully understand why. In this match with Pentagon, it was a little bit more full throttle, and it was a good match, and Moxley picked up the huge victory. And as I mentioned when talking about Pentagon, we could see this rivalry continue forwards, and maybe bleed into All Elite Wrestling. I also want to ask you, do you think that Moxley will beat Kenny Omega? Because, oh man, I know that I'm going to have a predictions contest coming up soon for All Out, and I just can't pick a winner between those two. I'm really struggling. At the moment, I think I'm edging towards Moxley, and then in the main event, Jericho and Adam Page, I just can't. I'm asking you guys to help me out, basically, is what I'm trying to do. Number 9, a huge week for a man I know personally, and one of the kindest wrestlers actually that I've ever met, but I've ruined his gimmick there totally because he's a big, mean, scary man from Belfast. It's Killian Dane. Killian Dane, huge victory this week over Matt Riddle. Potentially his biggest victory in all of WWE, in his whole WWE career so far. I'm gonna say yes, I think, because when someone's got the momentum of Matt Riddle and then someone stops him, especially a big heel like Killian Dane, that's really effective. I also enjoyed the takeover stuff from the other week when he jumped off the stage with Riddle and that poor random security guy who took the bump as well. But yeah, Dane looked really impressive. He's great when it comes to brawls and just hard-hitting, old-school style matches. And I think really he could be the next big thing in NXT in terms of the main event scene. I don't know if they'll make him NXT champion. I'd love to see it just because of personal bias, but he's certainly going to be more of a major player in NXT after this victory than beforehand. The other great thing for Dane as well is look at the contrast between now and what he was like in the dying days of Sanity, when all the steam had been sort of sucked out of that stable and then they all broke up and scattered to different parts of the roster. In fact, Nikki Cross, Killian Dane's wife, is doing really well on the main roster right now. She's kind of the exception to the rule. She is one half of the Women's Tag Team Champions, of course, alongside Alexa Bliss. But in terms of Killian Dane, I'm really glad that he's come out of this split with Sanity eventually looking pretty strong. Long may his push continue on NXT. First ever WCPW champion, Killian Dane. What a slice of history that is. And finally, my number 1 and this week's wrestler of the week. A man that I actually thought, when I was checking my stat sheet, I thought he'd won Wrestlers of the Week before because he picked up a hell of a load of points in 2018. Not as many this year, but actually I don't think he's been top of the mountain before. I couldn't find him on last week's sort of list, so maybe he only picked up like 9 points here, 8 points there, but it's the full 10 this week, and it's for Buddy Murphy. I've talked about how huge Killian Dane's victory was over Matt Riddle. Well, in this case, Buddy Murphy's win over Daniel Bryan on SmackDown Live could be an absolute career changer. Not only did he beat Daniel Bryan, he beat him clean as a whistle. He even dealt with some interference from Rowan towards the end, and he hit all of his impressive crowd-popping moves. And finally, this whole nickname, the best kept secret on SmackDown Live, is kind of coming true, or less true, I suppose, as he becomes less of a secret and more of just a wrestler that people want to see on a weekly basis. The match was excellent. I'm really not a fan of the fact that Bryan and Rowan had to beat him down afterwards, but I still think that the result itself is big enough for Buddy Murphy to pick up 10 points on this week's Wrestlers of the Week. It was monumental, and we've seen how good he can be when he's given a push in 205 Live. He had that amazing run as Cruiserweight Champion. He is, I think, probably the best Cruiserweight Champion in the history of 205 Live, barring Neville, I guess. But apart from that, I can't see anyone better than Buddy Murphy at holding that title. Now, obviously, on the main roster, he's having a bit more of a difficult time surrounded by bigger and more established guys, but this win over Daniel Bryan, man, I really cannot emphasize how shocked I was by this result and how pleasant a surprise it was too, because on weekly WWE TV, often you can just predict the result of the matches before they've even started. In this case, I thought I'd done exactly that. I was like, Bryan's gonna win, here we go. And then Buddy Murphy just picked up the shock victory out of nowhere. Can't believe it. Really delighted for him as well. 10 points for Buddy Murphy, and he is my Wrestler of the Week. Now let's take a look at the league table. Not a lot of change at the top of the table this week, although Ospreay's match with Amazing Red is coming up. It's already happened, but it's going to drop on New Japan World in a day or two's time. As we move a little bit further down, we do eventually get to Jon Moxley, who has jumped up to 14th level with David Starr, and then a little bit further down from him, Daniel Bryan up to 21st, ahead of Velveteen Dream and I think Darby Allin, and I just love the fact that Bryan's on this table after seemingly retiring from wrestling. It's so good to have him back, and that novelty still hasn't worn off for me. Thanks very much for watching, and let us know what you think in the comments section down below. You can follow Cultaholic on Twitter at Cultaholic and on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do, then please do check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Cultaholic, where you can pledge. And don't forget, of course, most importantly of all, to hit subscribe and to join us.